Hi there. I'm Sarah McCoubry. I'm the Executive Director at the Ontario Justice Education Network, or OJEN. And this is the first of a few short videos about some of the things that we at OJEN have learned about how difficult your job is when you're teaching law, and some of the ways that we aim to help you or to come up with some strategies where you can do a better job of teaching young people about the law. The job of a law teacher is difficult. We really appreciate this because not only are you transmitting information the way you might in some other courses like history or math or skill sets, you're also building an approach to conflict that is going to take that young person throughout the rest of their life in the way that they deal with their employers, with their neighbors, with their spouse, with their landlords. So not only are you transmitting content and some knowledge, but you're also building that young person's approach to conflict. And I think that's a really important aspect of your job. It's also probably one of the more challenging ones. You're building their capacity to be responsible citizens. And in this subject area, more so than in some other ones, I think it's important to know the limits of what you can do and the strategies to get help. In some areas, other than law, somebody might ask you a question and you can come up with the answer, or you can help them find the answer. You can build their research capacity. But in this area, you don't know exactly why someone's asking you a question. It may be that they are asking about whether or not the treatment their mother is getting at work is fair or legal or appropriate. They're actually making decisions about their life based on the information you're giving, and they might be making those decisions immediately. And so this is one of the areas where I really worry about the accuracy of information that young people get in a law class, in that the legal information or the understanding that they get in the class may be the only information that they or their family are getting about their rights and about how the justice system works. And I think that increases the obligation on you individually to make sure that you know when you do know the answer and when you don't. By no means do I think law teachers should be responsible for getting all of the accurate legal information out to citizens. But when a young person leaves your classroom thinking they do know the right answer, and they act, or their family acts based on that, we get into some really serious problems where people ignore their rights or miss an opportunity because they thought they had legal advice. So that brings me to my first point, the difference between legal information and legal advice. Legal advice can only be given by a lawyer and is information that someone is going to act on. Anything that starts with you should or you should not is legal advice. And at that point, not only do we want to make sure that person knows the right answer, but also, and quite practically, a lawyer is insured. If that advice turns out to be bad, there is some redress for somebody who has out money or has a problem with their real estate transaction or whatever it would be. There's a good reason why we only let lawyers give legal advice. Legal information is information about how a system works, about who works in that system. It's information you can find online or in brochures. It doesn't actually get into the specifics of someone's situation. So as soon as you find yourself being asked questions by a student that says, this happened to me, and then this happened, and now what should I do? You're talking about legal advice, and regardless of how you think you're giving that information, it's going to be understood as legal advice. You, as the law teacher, are the most expert person in legal issues that many young people will have met. So with that in mind, here's some strategies about how to not give legal advice. First of all, refer people out. As you're teaching law, you should always have a few numbers on hand of the 1-800 number for Justice for Children and Youth that represents young people directly, perhaps the legal aid clinic that's local to your school. You can always say, that sounds like a serious problem. You probably need to talk to a lawyer, and here's how you get one for free. There is something in Ontario called the lawyer referral system. Anybody can call a 1-800 number. They describe their area of law and are given the name of, I think, 2 different lawyers, and from those 2 lawyers they're entitled to 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes for free, in which to describe the issue they're having and find out if they should pursue a legal action. So the lawyer referral service, which is searchable online, is a great way to get somebody a good referral without you having to step beyond what you know. The other, probably the one thing that lawyers agree on, and I think it may be the only thing lawyers agree on as consistent legal advice, is that you should never give a statement to the police until you talk to a lawyer. But beyond that, you'd find that lawyers disagree themselves in every situation. If you've ever been at a party and you've met a lawyer and asked them a question about something you're dealing with, you'll find the most common answer is, it depends. That's not the lawyer being cagey. That's the classic answer that says every situation is different depending on the facts. And that is the right answer. If you take the information that's in a textbook and try to apply that to a student's problem or to a student's inaccurate portrayal of their parents' problem, that's when we get into a problem of people acting with bad advice. So I caution you about the serious consequences and hope that you will have a few of those referral options on hand as you move forward. Having told you about the worst things that can happen, here are the great things that can happen. You potentially are going to embark on the project of justice education, of building somebody's capacity to understand the justice system and to engage as citizens on a daily basis in this important aspect of our democracy. And I think that's a wonderful and exciting way to help prepare young people for their life as citizens. I'm going to highlight 4 quick points that I think are benefits of justice education. And when I say justice education, I mean education about the justice system and the way that it integrates with our democracy. So the first one, I think, is that young people become more comfortable with the idea that they are part of a democracy, that they as citizens are bound by rules, as are the rest of the citizens, and that those rules are made and interpreted in a way that's fair and transparent. That understanding helps people to approach all of the conflicts in their life with that mindset, not just the ones that are exciting enough to make it to the Supreme Court of Canada. Secondly, coexistence. Pluralism is tested daily in Canada, and in fact, it's often said that it's sort of our national project to have people live in peace and prosperity with laws that are just and people that are human. And I think the way that we approach that, the way that we build Canada to come together, is often through this approach to conflict. So not only do we need to value pluralism and multiculturalism, we actually need to know how to deal with it when we don't agree. This is actually easier than tolerance or than acceptance. We don't need to ever come to a common conclusion. What we need to do is simply know how to deal with conflict in a way that still lets us live healthy, successful, peaceful lives with those we disagree with. So that takes me nicely to my third point of the benefits of justice education, and that is a comfort with ambiguity. This will seem confusing, I think, often, especially to teachers who are looking to instill some concrete knowledge in their students, but in fact the biggest aspect of the justice system is its ability to deal with different situations. To say it depends, it's different from this fact scenario to the next one. That comfort with ambiguity lets us not approach each problem with set in stone, black or white answers. It lets us be open to change, to see a situation in a different light, to change our views when we hear how it affects people differently. That's an important approach to how our democratic system grows and how we respond to new challenges that come to us. The next one is an interesting one. I think good justice education builds respect for authority, the rule of law, and the idea that the laws apply to everyone and that there is some logic behind those laws helps you in the classroom. It helps you with classroom management. It helps to understand why the school might have rules that don't make any sense in your classroom, why the city might have rules that don't actually make sense in one neighborhood but affect the greater good, why as a society we've had to come up with some compromises. So that respect for authority comes from understanding the rule of law. And then finally, critical thinking. I think critical thinking is something you hear about all the time in the school context. I like to think about it in a quote actually from one philosopher who wrote that the point of justice education is not the production of more, the point of education is not the production of more physicists, biologists, or mathematicians, but rather the development of a person whose approach to life as a whole is that of a person who thinks, a rational person. In the legal context, we'd call that a reasonable person. And reasonableness is a concept you'll hear a lot about in terms of learning about the law, and that I will speak a little bit more about as I think the secret to making interesting, controversial discussions relevant to young people's lives in a way to build that reasonableness. Finally, I know I said finally a minute ago, but finally my last point, I think, is that justice education prepares the way for ethical decision-making amongst our citizens. Moral questions are difficult, and the answer isn't going to be the same for everybody. What I think is moral and what you think is moral may be quite different. But I want to know I live in a society with citizens who approach each question with ethics at the forefront. They may make a different decision than I do, but I have to have some respect for that decision-making process when I know that ethical decision-making was a big part of how they approach the question. The more we move people forward with the ability to judge, to identify bias, to assess sources, to approach problems responsibly and respectfully, to imagine the way it affects other people in their life, the more likely we are going to have those rational, reasonable decisions that in fact are quite conducive in a pluralist society. So that ethical decision-making is an important part of moving forward. Justice education, which encompasses both what you do in the classroom as well as what the courts do in the public sector, what the government is doing online, what OJEN is doing in Boys and Girls Clubs and newcomer organizations, is a really inspiring, exciting part of addressing some of the challenges that our society faces. You as teachers are paving the way for your students to set the social change agenda that meets their needs and that facilitates the evolution of our society. And we want to know, I want to know, that those citizens, as they start to vote, to take on jobs, to run businesses, to hire people, to teach other students, that they do that with a framework of ethical decision-making, of belief in the right of people to have different opinions, and still a core structure for how we might resolve or live together despite those differences, and an understanding of the importance of some of the structures that we have on a day-to-day basis that are part of our democracy. And that's where the justice system is the day-to-day interpretation of our laws and of the day-to-day aspect of democracy in a way that voting is the once every 4-year way to decide who's going to set those laws. Here we are as jurors, as litigants, as employers, as neighbors, as people riding the public transit, involved regularly in respecting those rights, protecting them for other people, and building a society that is one in which we see Canadian values continue to evolve and to promote the kind of peaceful coexistence that we'd like to see. So I commend you in taking the AQ that you're about to take, in that it's a tough job but a really inspiring and exciting job if you can find a way to engage young people as citizens for the rest of their life. So you'll hear more from me about some different ways to do that, but as a starting point, justice education is an important aspect of young people's preparation, and one that's easy to get wrong, but also very easy to get right and to find as a really rewarding part of your career.